Let's go ahead and build a custom handler in ASP.NET. I'm going to start by commenting out our end request implementation here, just because I don't want to have this additional data appended to my custom handler implementation. So let's go ahead and close that out. So to build a custom handler, we're just going to create a new class definition, and let me call this csvhandler.cs. And let me describe to you what I'm going to try to build here first, give you sort of a motivation for what we're trying to do. A custom handler is going to be something that processes a request and does whatever you want, right? You associate it with some endpoint, and you literally have full control. You can set the content type, you can respond with whatever data you want to. You could build a web service this way, a very simple web service, or very complex. What I'd like to do is send back some data. So I'm thinking I'm going to prepare some common delimited list of values that could be processed by a program like Excel, for example, in CSV format, and I'm going to stream that back as part of a response. So for example, if I put a tag on my page here, an anchor tag, and I set the anchor ref to href to data.csv, and just call this get data, what I want to have happen here is when this tag is clicked on, the anchor is clicked on, I want this request, which is going to be made to my ASP.NET application, to map onto my custom endpoint, my custom handler. And I'm going to build that handler to go retrieve some data and send it back in CSV format. So this is one thing you can do with custom handlers, is you can build custom endpoints that collect or serve back data in some specific format that might be useful to you. And then you can associate it with a specific extension, which is also going to be useful. So let's go ahead and try building that. Let's start here by putting it in a namespace. And I'm going to get rid of the constructor, and I'm going to implement the HTTP handler interface. And there's the two methods we looked at on the slide. And I'm going to return false for the pooling request. And here's where we're going to do our work. So to process the request, by the time we get here, the request will have gone through the pipeline, and we are now at the endpoint, and it's going to be up to us to serve back some content. So this is where I might go out to a database, retrieve some data, and then format it specifically so that the client can receive the results. So let's first set the content or the type of the response. So context.response.content type, and we'll just set the MIME type here just to application /CSV. It's a very common MIME type for this type of thing. And let's go ahead and write something to the response now. So context.response.write. And let's just do some numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4. And let's do a carriage return new line 5, 6, 7, 8. So a couple of rows of data separated by commas. And again, that's where you could pull some data out from whatever you wanted. One other thing you could use this for is you could look at the endpoint request, the actual URL, and you might want to go read that file and then do some processing on it before you send it back. That's another interesting example of using handlers. So I actually have that's a valid handler right there. That's an endpoint. We need to now wire that up. So when a user requests this endpoint, ASP.NET will map it onto this particular class and create an instance of it and invoke our process request method. So to do that, we need to go into the configuration file. And ASP.NET has a section in here called HTTP handlers, and you'll see a couple things already in here for ASP.NET 3.5. So all we're going to do is add another handler. You can specify the verb you want to use. So let's say we're going to restrict people to only using the GET request in HTTP. You could use star if you didn't care. And for the path, I'm going to be very specific about this and say the path needs to be data.csv. So only that specific path should map onto this endpoint. You could also use star.something as you see done up here. That's a valid thing to do. And let's go ahead and specify the type. So the type is going to be the actual class definition, which in our case was ps.csv handler, as you saw in this file here, ps.csv handler. And we also need to specify the assembly. In this case, because we're in the same project, the same application, the assembly is inferred, so I actually don't need to specify it here. But in general, you would then follow this with a comma, assembly name, and you could even add the strongly named elements as well if you had an assembly that was deployed in the GAC. But that should do it. So ASP.NET will now see that I have this particular path wired up to this endpoint, and if a request comes in for that path, it should construct an instance of our handler class and map onto it. So let's try running that. Clicking on the link to data.csv, and notice I got prompted. It said, hey, do you want to open or save the file? Because I returned the CSV content. And if I click on open, notice it drops me into this little Excel-like interface. So this is actually a custom little thing I threw on because I don't have Excel installed, but it shows XLS content. So if I had Excel installed, that would open up Excel and display the data directly in there. So that's an example of a custom handler that we're using to send back specifically formatted data outside of the page architecture. You're just building up your own endpoint and defining exactly what is going back and how it's going back. So next, we'll take a look at how do you integrate this into IIS, because things get a little bit different when you start actually deploying it there.